what's the point of the G7 anymore? I mean, I don't understand what the point of it is. I was under the impression that the G7 was about finance, economics, trade, but they don't even spend 1 minute talking about that or addressing that. They invite Zelensky. What is Ukraine and Zelensky doing at the G7 meeting? I mean, this is absurd. It really is absurd. And then they have these ceremonies where they're signing these security agreements with Ukraine. There's no place for this stuff at the G7. Do this on your own time, Biden and Zelensky.
Yeah.
This has no place in the G7. None of this stuff. This is just all PR tactics. It's just all PR. That's all it is. Noise and PR. The G7, it doesn't really deal with the concerns of the G7 and their place in the world and in world trade. Their focus is on destroying Russia and China. How does that help the financial situation of these countries in the G7? Going after Russia and China, going after China, that's going to help your financial situation, G7? I mean, the G7 should just be dissolved, or it should be named something else. I don't know. Maybe call it the group of countries plus the man in the green T-shirts giving money to each other. I don't know what to call it anymore, because there's no purpose to it. Zero. There's zero purpose to the whole thing.
You're completely right. I mean, by the way, there have been articles in the Chinese media that are making exactly that point, that the summit meeting, the G7 meetings now, have become just meaningless rituals. I mean, the security agreement that is being made between Zelensky and Biden is a case in point. In itself, it provides for nothing beyond what the United States is already doing. It is not a treaty. So the United States is not entering into any treaty commitments for Ukraine. It is not undertaking to defend Ukraine, and it's only going to function as an executive order of the president. It's often the way, by the way, anybody who is familiar with the fall of empires will know that as empires decline, the ceremonies become more and more elaborate. The rituals become ever more elaborate and ever more complicated, because the people who are leading this declining and collapsing empire seem to somehow need the reassurance of the ceremonies in order to persuade themselves that they still matter. So this is what the G7 is. By contrast, the BRICS is a genuine, purposeful organization. At its core, I mean, maybe some of the members of the BRICS are just passengers, but at its core, there is a very dynamic China, Russia, to a great extent, despite what people think, India triangle that's driving it forward. The very fact that there are tensions between India and China, by the way, probably to some extent even intensify that quality of dynamism. And I mean, they have a plan. And, it might not be a plan that works out in all its details. I mean, all kinds of things could go wrong. But anybody who's worked in business or law or war or anything like that knows that the person who has the plan tends to be the person who wins. And the real focus of decision making is drifting away from the G7. Because, as I said, it's a ritual, ceremonial meeting in which they all sign up to whatever agenda it is that the Americans have drawn up for them. The American bureaucracy has drawn up for them. A little bit like Politburo meetings became, apparently, in the Brezhnev-era Soviet Union, when, they all met in a splendid room. They spent hours droning over speeches that had been drawn up for them. They signed off on documents, and it never really meant anything. That's basically what the G7 has become. It's, as I said, an empty ritual, very, very different from the much more purposeful institution that it was when it was first set up. but it's got no answers to any of the real problems of today. It's not connected to the reality of the lives of the people of the West, who are the people that the G7 is supposed to represent. As you say, people like Zelensky get invited, who have no real role in any of the decisions that ought to be made. But it makes the people who turn up feel important.